Hey guys, how's it going? Spidey here for another video. Today we're going to talk about the service intervals for your G, your Z, or your Q. So the reason this video idea comes up is I'm on a VQ page on Facebook, and I've seen a lot of people saying, hey, I'm at 80,000 miles, what do I do? Hey, I'm at 120,000 miles, what do I do? Hey, my car only has 50,000 miles on it, doesn't need anything. And there's always a bunch of different answers to that. And then everyone starts saying, don't take it to the dealer, they're going to charge you up the ass, which is not true, at least for some dealers, but I'll do a separate video on that. So I want my video to be the definitive one and done video. If you want to know what you need at your specific mileage, you come watch my video and then you'll know. So how I'm planning on doing this is I'm going to tell you the different service intervals and what we recommend at those service intervals, and then once I get to 100,000 miles, I'm going to afterwards explain why we recommend every individual thing that I recommended. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I'm also, if you notice, I'm wearing a shirt from Speed Culture Studios. It's kind of faded out, but that's because I use it a lot. Speed Culture Studios, excellent YouTuber, a lot of good knowledge, very logical and level-headed guy, and I get a lot of my video ideas from watching his content, so please go watch him if you haven't already. I'm trying to get some money together to put his catback exhaust on my M35 because it's the best sounding catback for VQs in my humble opinion. So, for those of you who don't know me, I used to be an Infiniti technician for 5 years. I'm just giving you guys my credentials. I started out as the shop bitch, going around the shop, cleaning up the shop, making sure everyone's brake cleaner was topped up, stuff like that. Then I went on to being a lube tech, and then I started changing out engines, changing out transmissions, changing out turbos, stuff like that. So for those reasons, I feel as if I'm qualified to talk about this particular subject. So, let's start out at 5,000 miles. And then most of you probably don't have a car with that low of miles, but I'm trying to be as thorough as possible. So 5,000 miles, oil and filter replacement, and a tire rotation. And obviously if you have staggered wheels and tires, you don't need it. Just keep some money set to the side for replacing the tires, because you're probably doing hood ratchet. So now jumping all the way to 20,000 miles, because during the first 19,000 you don't really need anything, maybe aside from engine air filters and cabin filters, but I'm not going to put those at a specific service interval because that is completely subjective to where you live. If you're in a really dusty area, you gotta change the filters up more. That's just how it is. It's easy enough to check your engine air filter, and it's easy enough, well, for some people and for certain models, to check your cabin filter. You could probably find a YouTube video or ask Infiniti or Nissan how to do it. So anyhow, 20,000 miles, we recommend an oil filter change and a tire rotation and a brake fluid exchange. So now fast forwarding to 40,000 miles, and for the rest of this video I'm not going to mention needing an oil and filter change and a tire rotation, just because that should be a given in my humble opinion. Once you get to 40,000 miles, brake fluid exchange and a power steering fluid exchange. Brake fluid is recommended to be replaced every 2 years or every 20,000 miles, and power steering fluid is recommended to be changed every 40,000 miles. So, when you're going to get to around the 50,000 mile mark, you won't need anything, but the techs will start advising you that it's almost time to change your transmission fluid and your differential fluid. So if you drive like a normal person and not like a bat out of hell like I do, then you can abide by waiting until 60,000 miles. If you are a car guy and you do drive the way us car guys do, then I would advise doing it at 50,000 miles, because in my opinion, the sooner you do it, the less damage you could possibly do to the car, because you have more fresh, more up-to-date fluids in your car. So 60,000 miles, you recommend the brake fluid, transmission fluid, and differential fluid. So obviously, if you are all-wheel drive, then you're also going to need front differential fluid and transfer case fluid to coincide with your transmission fluid and your differential fluid. And yes, if you're all-wheel drive, that's going to be a bit more expensive. And I wouldn't choose one diff over the other. They're both equally important to me. So 80,000 miles, again, power steering fluid, and then your brake fluid again. And then at the 80,000 mile mark, we also recommend a fuel system cleaning. And I will go more into depth about that later, because some people believe in it, some people don't. So we don't really recommend anything around 90,000 miles, but we will start advising you that once you get to 100,000 miles, you're going to want spark plugs. So again, it's not, you don't have to, it's we're advising that it's going to happen soon, because we're trying to be nice, and we don't want you to think, and we don't want it to be an all of a sudden thing, you know? It's like your girlfriend breaking up with you suddenly. Thanks for giving me some warning. Bad joke. So now you're at 100,000 miles, and you're probably thinking to yourself, what do I need now? So you're going to want brake fluid, you're going to want power steering fluid, then you're going to want to change the spark plugs out. And that's about it from all I can remember. And then once you get to 120,000 miles, you're basically rinsing and repeating. But now at 120 miles, you're going to want to do transmission fluid again and differential fluid again, and then your transfer case and front diff if you have such things. Something else I got cut out. Sorry about that. So now as to why we recommend the things that I said we recommend. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it has a tendency to attract water. Now water from the outside is going to have dirt particles in it, and those dirt particles can get into things such as your ABS actuator, which it would be really bad if dirt got into that, and it can get into your brake calipers, which you don't want the friction of the piston moving against the dirt. That could help it to fill prematurely, or it can start allowing fluid to start seeping around the piston seal. And I've also never had a complaint to where, I've never had it to where I changed brake fluid on a friend's car or a family member's car, and they didn't tell me afterwards to where the brake feel was better or that the brakes were more touchy. I've always had people say that the brakes felt better afterwards. So I see it as a why wouldn't you fluid. It's brakes. Maintain your brakes. Don't just do the calipers and the rotors. Do the fluid too. I mean, that's what actuates the pads in the first place. Power steering fluid, pretty subjective one. I've seen the power steering pump fail before because the fluid was never changed. Same principle, the fluid can get dirty, then the fluid can eventually just start clogging up shit or messing up shit. Or it can even make the power steering rack fail because there's gears inside of the rack and you don't want shit to get in the gears. So Nissan has OEM power steering fluid. It's not transmission fluid, it's actual power steering fluid. And as far as I know, it is completely different from the automatic transmission fluid. Though if you wanted to, you probably could use ATF. I know everyone uses ATF in their cars for the power steering fluid. Because in my personal opinion, if they make a specialty fluid for that specific thing, then I would buy that specialty fluid, but that's just me. Transmission fluid, the super subjective one. Again, I've seen transmissions fail because the fluid was never replaced. I just had a guy ask me if he should be worried about his car slipping if he brought the dealer to have the transmission fluid replaced. And at least with the 7AT, it's really difficult to make the car slip afterwards once you do it, because you have two drain plugs. You have the big one that's a 19 millimeter that you actually drain all the fluid out of, and then you have a smaller one that's an Allen head, and it's not a drain plug, it's a adjustment plug. Basically what happens is you'll let the car warm up to operating temperature, and then you undo the plug, and if no fluid comes out, that means you are underfilled and you need to add more fluid. If fluid just starts pouring out, the service manual wants you to wait for the fluid to get to a small steady stream, and then you can put the plug back in. You can let it get to the point to where it starts dripping out little by little, but in my opinion, I would rather have a little too much fluid than a little too little fluid. You can do a drain and fill for the transmission in the driveway. That's completely fine. I like taking it. Obviously, I say this because I used to work on my own car at the dealer. I prefer taking it to the dealer because we had a machine to where we could splice into the transmission cooler line, and it would suck in the old fluid and then add brand new fluid. So like 98% of your system has brand new fluid in it. And I personally think that's a better way to do it. Differentials, that one seems to be a little subjective also. People saying do not flush it, you must exchange it. There's only one way to do it. There's no cooler lines you can use to actually exchange the fluid. You have a fill plug and you have a drain plug. You take out the fill plug first, obviously, so if it breaks, then you didn't let all your transmission fluid your diff fluid come out. And then you take out your drain plug. You clean all the contaminants off the both plugs, and then something I personally like to do is fill the differential with a little bit of brand new fluid so it can let other shit come out. And then you put the drain plug back in, and then Nissan's procedure is to fill up the differential until fluid starts pouring out of the hole, and then once it's a small stream again, or you can wait for it to stop draining completely. I always like to have a little bit extra in. Then you can put the plug back in, and then you're all done. The differential fluid is by far the easiest freaking fluid you can do. I mean, it's even easier than doing transmission fluid in my opinion, because now you don't have a filter you have to worry about either. As far as filters for the automatic transmissions, we have never fucked with them, and we have never had a problem with not fucking with the filter, so that's that. Then transfer case fluid, I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. It's, if I remember correctly, on the G37s and on the all-wheel drive VQ Q50s, I believe it is automatic transmission fluid they use for the transfer case. I could be incorrect, but I'm 98% positive it's also ATF fluid. So you have the option to either use OEM Nissan fluid, or we also use the brand Wins for our transmissions. I never had a problem with the Wins fluid, so you could use that if you wanted to, or you could use the OEM fluid. Either one works. You do you. I have, however, heard that when it's filled with the Nissan fluid, the transmission, it does shift a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little bit better is what I've heard. So if that's something you're concerned about, then you have that piece of info. Coolant. If you leave coolant alone for too long, it has a tendency to become acidic and it can start eating through things. I've heard that part of the reason Subaru head gaskets like to go out is because there's a coating on the head gasket to where if the coolant starts to get too acidic, it can eat away at the coating on the head gasket, and it can help promote head gasket failure. I'm not sure as to how true that is, but it's something I've heard. But that same principle can apply to any car that uses coolant. So then the specific gravity of the coolant to where it's going, the freezing temperature where it's supposed to freeze at, that can change over time as well. So that's why we recommend it. And for the most part, it's not a bad fluid at all to do. It's only a bitch to do on the DEs because they like to hold air pockets, but that's about it. Then on the, I'm not going to mention the VR30s. I'll make any VR30 content for maintenance a separate video since they have a few more hiccups than the VQs do. Fuel system cleaning. So I don't think Nissan has a special fuel system cleaner, and if they do, I never saw it. We used Wins cleaner, and the way it worked was we had a bottle of Wins cleaner that we will pour into the gas tank, and then it cleans out your fuel lines and it cleans out your fuel injectors. And then we had another one, and this was in my video about how to get your Sentra ready to be tuned. We had another one to where we would pour the fluid into a bottle that has a hose coming out of it, and then you would disconnect the evap line after the purge valve, and because it goes into the intake manifold right after the throttle body, so it's evenly distributed to all the cylinders, and that helps clean off the backs of the intake valves and whatnot. And that works whether you're port injected or you're direct injected. So obviously, port injected and direct injected, different things, and they do different things with the carbon. Port injected, you can still get carbon buildup, and we've seen horrible carbon buildup on port injected, but it's never going to be anywhere near as bad as direct injected, because the gasoline on port injected is help cleaning off the backs of the intake valves. And then you can also get carbon buildup on the pistons themselves, because a byproduct of combustion is carbon. So obviously you don't want to valve the stick or anything, and it just helps the airflow a little bit better. So that's why we recommend fuel system cleanings. We've solved a few misfires after doing a fuel system clean. So spark plugs. I mean, they're spark plugs. Why wouldn't you do them? Not to sound like an ass or anything, but your spark plugs have everything to do with how your engine runs. You need to have OEM part number spark plugs. I have seen people use Autolite spark plugs, and they never seem to work out well. And I've seen people use Denso or NGK plugs. I believe the VQ35HR uses Denso plugs, but then every other car uses NGK unless you... And using a off part number plug can make the car misfire. I've seen it personally. And then that the spark plug gap is too much, and the car is going to have a harder time firing the air-fuel mixture. Or if the spark plug gap is too close, then actually I had this happen. It was a Q50, and a guy put in new spark plugs, and the OEM gap is supposed to be 0.043, and the gaps on all the spark plugs were at 0.010. So the car kept dumping and dumping and dumping fuel to help it combust, and all the unburned fuel got into the cat, and the cat started failing afterwards just because the gap wasn't right. So spark plugs is incredibly important also, and I don't feel like I should have to explain that. So that is that for maintenance. I try to be as thorough as I possibly could with all that, and I hope I was pretty thorough. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, whatnot, comment below or contact me on Instagram. I try my best to be responsive and to be helpful. So, thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, see ya. Peace.